Oh my God.
All around them, grinning skulls began to shimmer into being, on roots, on rocks, all facing toward the interlopers. Some had gashes or holes in their craniums. Some had desiccated scraps of flesh still clinging to them. Then full skeletons began to materialize along with them, a few of them draped in rotting wool tartans.
Garin, tell me you see this too.
Unfortunately, yes.
Griffith dropped his shovel and took off running in the direction of the trail.
Screw it! I did not sign up for this!
Wiggins!
The other tech took off after him as wisps of fog began to rise from the ground.
Annja, isn't this what you saw on Bean McDooey?
The breeze turned into a stiff wind and the fog began to swirl.
Did that one just move?
Impossible!
No, it's not.
The skeletons began to awkwardly rise from the ground. Some seemed to have trouble getting their skulls balanced on their neck bones. Another struggled with a missing leg. Yet another seemed to stare in consternation at a left arm that refused to join with the rest of his body. Garin suddenly dove for the equipment bag and grabbed a shovel.
Roux!
He tossed a pickaxe, and Roux expertly caught it.
Annja, what are you waiting for?
Annja had been mesmerized by the horrifying vision, but she shook her head and tried to think rationally as the skeletons began to move awkwardly toward them.
They may not be real. Maybe they're visions, hallucinations.
Roux swung his pickaxe into the skull of the nearest skeleton. The headless stack of bones staggered, tripped over a rock, and collapsed into the moss. Roux held the pickaxe toward Annja, skull still impaled on the sharp end.
Does this look like a hallucination to you?
Roux swung his shovel into a skeleton's ribcage. It flew sideways into another skeleton, and they both fell in a pile. But 4 more dead warriors moved inexorably toward them. Annja held out her right hand. At the sight of Joan of Arc's sword, the skeletons paused. But their right hands raised up, and weapons began to appear. Annja recognized them immediately. Scottish claymores, double-bladed, two-handed broadswords almost identical to the one she wielded.
Okay, I guess you guys should try to stay behind me.
They turned slowly as the skeletons circled, their swords raised, looking for an opening. Annja decided to see just how solid their weapons were. The skeleton parried, but its movements were awkward. Another skeleton had swung at Garin, and he managed to fend it off with the shovel.
Those swords have a long reach.
Roux, Garin, drop!
They hit the dirt. Annja parried a thrust from one attacker, spun, ducked a swing from another, and stabbed into its empty ribcage. She quickly turned to face the other attackers, but they were watching with something akin to astonishment as their comrade began to crumble. His claymore hit the ground and vanished in a blue flash. 3 pairs of empty eye sockets turned toward Annja. She raised her sword, took a firm stance, and looked right back.
Okay, boys, what'll it be?
They raised their swords and spread out. The one to her left suddenly stepped in and swung. She parried the swing and returned it, but the others took the opportunity to surround Annja. She relaxed, concentrated, and felt the energy of Joan of Arc's sword coursing through her veins. She spun and swung and stabbed, always managing to keep them at bay, but even without nervous systems, they seemed to be remembering their training. One swing staggered her opponent. She brought her sword around and chopped down through his collarbone. Annja stepped back and readied the sword as he crumbled, the wind swirling his remains like dust. The 2 remaining warriors cocked their swords over their shoulders. Annja stepped in and caught their swords on her crossguard. They stood there, locked in place, Annja trying not to gag at the stench of rotting flesh. Annja heaved upward, and the 2 warriors staggered back. She spun and chopped through one skeleton's ribcage, cutting him in half. The last warrior watched as his brother-in-arms crumbled and swirled away in the wind. He looked at Annja, the sad scraps of his tartan fluttering in the wind. Then he planted the tip of his claymore in the moss, went down on one knee in the swirling mist, folded his hand bones on the pommel, and dropped his head.